Good evening. This is Andrew Serloff, Assistant Superintendent with Quaker Valley School District, and tonight we're going to do a COVID-19 update for our school community. The key areas we're going to cover tonight are an update on current transmission levels, once again reviewing the decision-making process that we follow when we make decisions regarding COVID-19, taking a look at some updated guidance that we've received both from the CDC and the Department of Education, and then a discussion about next steps with regard to our learning models. So we begin with the COVID-19 transmission update. So as you may have seen from our messages through email, Allegheny County moved back into the substantial designation for COVID-19 for 2 weeks as of April 2nd, 2021. So we are now currently considered in the substantial range for transmission. The implications of that are that the district must once again operate under the signed Department of Education attestation form, which we submitted to the Department of Education in November. What this means for Quaker Valley is that school closings now are not a recommendation, nor are they a decision that the district gets to make alone, but we must use Department of Education guidance as well as our consultations with the Allegheny County Health Department. So when we have certain numbers of cases in each of our individual school buildings, those may lead to closings. Again, the length of those closings will be decided upon based on the guidance we have, as well as our ability to work with the Department of Health from Allegheny County so that they may advise. Secondly, we must again use the 14-day rolling average as the metric for which we decide how many cases each building has and which cases we need to follow with respect to potentially closing a school. This updated chart is once again posted on the Quaker Valley School District website, as well as our COVID-19 tracker, which has been there since early fall. Once again, want to review the decision-making process. So every time the district receives new guidance, which is typically every 2 to 4 weeks, we look at the guidance, we look at the research that supports that guidance, we look at our current plan, we alter our plans as they may need to be altered, then we implement any new decisions or new models, and then from there we look at how those models are progressing, and if necessary, we make revisions. And that process repeats over and over again. It's an iterative process. It's something we've used since the beginning of the school year, and we believe it has served our school and our community well thus far. So when we talk about that new guidance, we received several pieces of information over the last few weeks that I'd like to review for everyone this evening. So the first is updates from the CDC, and this guidance was dated March 19th. If you'd like to see the entire document, you can log on to cdc.gov, and the document we're referencing this evening is the operational strategy for K-12 schools through phased prevention. The summary of those recent changes mostly affect physical distancing, in that the recommendation is now, as long as students are wearing masks, they may be safely distanced 3 feet apart in certain circumstances. And in other circumstances, depending on COVID transmission, the recommendation is to stay at the 6 feet. We are going to discuss that in a little more depth a little later on in this presentation. You can see the other recommendations that are there, as well as the key points that were in the update from the CDC. Moving ahead, we received updated guidance as well from the Pennsylvania Department of Education on many topics, but specifically with regard to physical distancing. The nice part about this new guidance from the Department of Education is that it now directly aligns with guidance from the CDC. So CDC and the Department of Ed have actually aligned their guidance, which now adds some clarity and assists the school districts in making their decisions on how they should plan moving forward. So depending on the screen in which you are viewing this presentation, this writing may be a little bit small. But once again, if you log on to education.pa.gov and look for their phased reopening of pre-K to 12 schools during COVID-19, you can see all the information and all the updates and changes that Department of Education made. But specifically, once again, they aligned their physical distancing guidance to the 3 feet mark depending on what level of school and the level of transmission in the communities. They're asking that we maintain 6 feet of distance to the maximum extent feasible in all other settings besides inside the classroom. They are also asking us, depending on level of transmission, to consider cohorting at all levels. And we'll talk a little bit more about the possibilities of that later on in this presentation. Most importantly, beyond distancing, though, in this guidance, is the information at the bottom about close contacts. So even though the CDC and the Department of Ed are recommending using 3 feet as the safe marker for distancing in the classroom, when there is a positive case of COVID-19, the 6-foot marker is still the delineation for who is a close contact and who must quarantine. So if students are 3 feet apart in a classroom and there is a student who is tested and found to be positive, there will be many students that will have to quarantine because they will be within inside that 6-foot radius. So moving ahead, this particular chart was part of the guidance that was updated by the CDC on February 26th and has remained consistent in the March 19th update. And what this chart explains is what the new levels of transmission are and how they're designated both by metric and by color based on CDC guidance. So for the week that most recently ended April 9th, if you look at that chart, you will see that the total number of new cases in Allegheny County per 100,000 residents over the past 7 days is above the 100 mark at 177.4. Therefore, based on those cases, that's considered high transmission. The percentage of tests that are positive in Allegheny County for the past 7 days for the week ending April 9th was 9.6%. That's in a substantial range, but obviously it is moving up and moving closer to the 10% threshold that will also put that metric into the high transmission range. So with this chart, we look specifically at some longitudinal data for Allegheny County. So we look at the same CDC levels using the low, moderate, substantial, and high. And we see the actual data dating back to the week ending January 8th all the way to the most recent end of week, which is April 9th. So as you can see, when we last made a report in March, the data was trending in a positive direction, and we went down to our low point of 89.7 cases at 5.2% positivity. Unfortunately, over the past month, those metrics in Allegheny County have gone in a declining direction to the point now where, once again, as we showed on the prior slide, we have a substantial high range for our cases per 100,000, and we are considered in the higher range for PCR percent positivity. So what that means when we talk about learning models and the suggestion for learning models is captured in this slide, which is the updated from March 19th CDC learning model guidance. So once again at the top, you see the same levels, you see the same colors being used, and that sun symbol represents where Allegheny County is in its current level of transmission. So what does Allegheny County recommend? If you look at the chart, it recommends that elementary schools should have at least 3 feet of distance between students in the classroom, and that cohorting is recommended, and that in-person learning may continue. For middle school and high school, we are ticking very close to being completely in the high transmission range on both metrics. When that occurs, the guidance says that schools can use cohorting, ought to use cohorting, but when they cannot use cohorting, then students must remain 6 feet apart in their classrooms. Cohorting is when a group of students remains together in the same classroom all day long, and they do not have interaction with students from other classroom cohorts. That is the model we've used in elementary school since the beginning of this year, And it's why we've been able to have 4 days of in-person learning in our elementary schools since the very first day of school. And I also believe, based on the research and the science and the data that we have, it is an explanation as to why we've typically had low levels of transmission in our elementary schools. We not only have distancing of approximately 6 feet in all of those classrooms, but we are utilizing cohorting. In our middle school and high school models, cohorting is not possible. Our students change classes every period because students have various levels of classes, they have various electives and various offerings. So the cohorting model really isn't an option for middle school and high school. So the fact that we are almost completely in the high transmission range when we look at this chart would indicate that to the best of our ability, we should still be maintaining 6 feet of distancing in our classrooms. The Department of Education, through the state of Pennsylvania, gave similar updated guidance in the update that went into effect on April 12th. Once again, if you look at this chart, which came out earlier this week, you will see that the same metrics are used with regard to incidence rate and percent positivity. Right now, we are in the substantial range in Allegheny County because this is an or designation, not an and. So if one metric or the other metric is substantial, the county designation is substantial. So since the 177.4 incidence rate is above 100, we are in substantial. When you look to the lower right corner, you see that sun symbol. The recommendation for instructional models for the Department of Education here in our state is that we should be using a blended learning model or a full remote learning model. So it's with that guidance that we're going to be talking about next steps within our district with respect to those learning models. But first, we want to give a quick update on vaccinations for faculty and staff. At this point, all faculty and staff members who've chosen to be vaccinated have been vaccinated. Full efficacy, meaning that those inoculations will have had their 2-week time period to become fully effective, is expected for all faculty and staff by the end of April. And at this time, we know that approximately 80% responded affirmatively to being vaccinated, but the exact figure may be higher as some employees may have chosen to receive that vaccine privately, either through their own physicians or through another clinic. However, we would also like to point out that the number of teachers and administrators who've been vaccinated may also be higher than the number listed here, as the 80% accounts for all employees of the district, including those who are extra pay for extra duty positions like coaches, sponsors, as well as our own staff members in the other areas for cafe, cleaning, custodial, maintenance, and the like. So what are our next steps? Based on the guidance we've seen, based on our metrics in Allegheny County, based on the information we have at our disposal, and also looking at our internal data. As you've probably seen over the last several days, we've sent many messages regarding positive COVID cases within our schools. This is not unusual. When Allegheny County has an upturn in cases, we see that same upturn here locally. And so we've obviously seen more students and more positive cases over the last few weeks, even such that we crossed a threshold in Edgeworth Elementary School this afternoon, and we will be closing that building for contact tracing and cleaning and disinfecting tomorrow. So with respect to the learning models, so this is as of April 19th, 2021. So when April 19th begins next week, these are the learning models that we expect to continue. So in our elementary, we will be maintaining our 4 days on campus. We'll maintain the 1 day of asynchronous on Wednesday. So that model will be unchanged. In our secondary schools, in our middle and high school, those models will also stay very much the same. We are going to maintain our 3-day on campus with the 1 day live synchronous and the 1 day asynchronous also on Wednesday, with one additional change. Any high school senior that is currently registered for in-person learning, so you're currently attending 3 days a week, those seniors, as they finish their weeks here at Quaker Valley, may have a need to attend on that 4th day to complete something before their time at Quaker Valley ends. So high school seniors that are currently registered for in-person attendance may attend on the 4th day or 4 days in any particular week as we move through to the end of the school year. Should we see conditions improve and the case numbers get lower and the county moves out of substantial, we may be able to offer even our seniors who are currently fully online an opportunity to attend in person for the final few weeks of the school year. One more thing that we'd like to mention is, even though we are seeing conditions deteriorate within the county with respect to COVID-19, because our 3-day model has shown that most of our classrooms in the middle school and high school can maintain 6 feet, not all. Some of our classrooms are currently at 4 feet or more, but most are still at 6, even in our 3-day hybrid. Therefore, we are not making a recommendation this evening to roll back to a 2-day hybrid. So even though we're in substantial, we are not recommending a rollback to the 2-day hybrid. We are aware that some of our neighboring schools have had to make some of those kinds of changes, but we believe we have enough distancing and we have good mitigation efforts in place that we can safely continue with our 3-day model in our secondary schools. For the remainder of the year, we will still also have the fully synchronous and asynchronous options for all students. So as a reminder, this is actually the first week that all students will have a full week of the 3-day hybrid model, as we had 2 shortened weeks prior to this one. So this just shows the days of the week and the alphabetical groups who are attending in our 3-day hybrid and the days that those students attend. And I want to revisit this slide. This is a slide that we looked at when we did our update last month, and that's the positive and negative potential impacts of the 3-day hybrid. And what we've seen is this very much has borne itself out as we expected. There is a very positive impact of having an extra day for students on campus. I know our students are enjoying now being back in school 3 days a week. It is an incremental move, as we had said, to more normalized. And on-campus students are also able to see some friends in the other parts of the alphabet they hadn't been able to see in school since the beginning of the school year. At the same time, we are also managing some things that are potentially disruptive about having more students in the building. If we have the classrooms that are 4+ feet, as we talked about, when we have positive cases, there will be additional students who need to quarantine. The other thing that we're going to see is when those disruptions happen, there could be a potential impact on activities, athletics, as well as students being asked to learn from home for a 7 to 10 day time period. However, we still maintain that we think that the 3-day hybrid is best for our district right now. And as we said, we are not recommending a change from that model. And finally, a reminder, once again, is we are all in this together. This has been a very challenging year, but at the same time, so many positive things have continued on with activities, with athletics, with increased days for in-person learning. And before we go, to remind that in our middle school and high school, we have identified many students who do have particular needs that does require them to be in the building 4 days a week. So we are happy to report that that is going well, that those students are continuing to learn, and that they also will be able to remain in their 4-day program while we move forward on April 19th with our learning model. Thank you very much. And once again, thank you to all of those who have made this year possible. Good evening.